Podcast time, baby. Featuring the caffeinated Kyle Elliott, Part 1. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Mike Tech Studios podcast. We have been touching on topics, as you've heard in the past couple of weeks, about candidates and staffing. Today, a gentleman out on the West Coast here by the name of Kyle Elliott. He has a website, caffeinatedkyle.com. Kyle, how's it going?
Good. I just got back from meeting with a client actually at Starbucks.
Kyle, I've been looking over your work, man. I'm really impressed. You got an MPA from the Daniel J. Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at University of Washington, BS in Health Education from San Fran State University. Tell me, man, what made you want to get into the recruiting field in the first place?
I do career coaching, so I always like to make that distinction. I work with a lot of recruiters and I help candidates partner with recruiters and reach out to them to show how they're the best candidate possible for positions. This knack for helping people find jobs, solidify their careers, really has been spurred from this desire to help people. I've always had a passion for helping people, and it started a while back. I first went to San Francisco State to do nursing, and then I ended up switching to health education. In my master's, I wanted to do healthcare administration, and I always had this desire to help people. And throughout that time, I've also always worked. I started working when I was 12, then year-round when I was 14, and then since 16, I've been working full-time. So for almost a decade, I've been working along with helping people. And I realized over time I could really marry these two items, the helping people and being really good at finding jobs and finding awesome jobs for how old I was. So over time, I married these two and I created caffeinatedkyle.com. So through that, I'm able to help people do the whole career thing that I'm really good at. So that's kind of how I got into this space.
That's really impressive. My question is, just out of curiosity, what was your first job that you did at 14?
14, I was a busser. I'm at Good Times Cafe in my hometown. So it's this 50s diner. And I worked there every weekend bussing tables. I ended up cooking. I did some serving. At 14, I looked like I was like 11. I've always had a big So people were like, are you old enough to work here? And I was like, yep, I have a work permit. And then by the time I was 16, I was working full time at Denny's as a server, 40 hours a week on top of going to high school. So I've always had this drive and I've always had these jobs people thought I was way too young for, but I still went in and did them. So I was like, I can do this and get paid to help other people with their careers too and help them find jobs that they love.
Well, actually, it's funny. You remind me of a very good server. There's a local burger joint and the guy always takes care of me. You just sound just like him, which is hilarious. Anybody who is listening and will know that. I just like dead ringer. So I just thought about that and said, you know what? Have you served before? Yeah, that sounds about right. So.
Yeah. And I think as I work with people too, people are like, oh, why do you list like working at Denny's on your resume or on your LinkedIn or talk about it? And I don't think people realize how transferable those skills as a server are. You're working in a super busy environment. You're working with a lot of difficult people, especially at Denny's at 3 a.m. No one comes in and they're happy and in a great mood at 3 a.m. at Denny's. So I think oftentimes people really undervalue the work that servers do, that our barista at Starbucks does. So I always highlight that because I'm like, if you want to do that for a career, that's awesome. I've met a lot of great customer service people who do that for a career. And if you want to switch careers, there's a bunch of amazing transferable skills. So that's why I always make sure to highlight that because people don't always realize how much knowledge it takes, experience dealing with people when they're hungry.
I'm not going to lie. Anybody who knows me, I'm the worst person to deal with if I haven't eaten. In that industry, I mean, you're paying attention to customized orders. You are listening to people that sometimes aren't very clear about what it is that they're asking for, that they want. And sometimes they forget. You're ordering a hamburger or something, and you didn't want pickles. It's your job to be a mind reader. But if, let's say, for example, you've waited on that table a couple of times or that person is familiar, you might just go ahead and do it without that person knowing. That's a seamless support system that just occurred. Growing up the ladder, so to speak, and applying those experiences to these other jobs that are applicable. I remember I actually worked at Old Navy. It was a Target store, and I think it was like 2005. The thing was, it was very difficult to stand out in that store because there was a lot of things going on. A Target store, you're not familiar, or just for listeners, is basically a store that's not doing too well. There's a lot of LP, loss prevention issues. It's just hemorrhaging money. There may not even be a set structure for management. So the funny thing is that I used to bounce around to different places, but my favorite place was the fitting room. People would think that that is kind of a weird place to be. And I go, other people are kind of back there drawing on the walls or not doing anything, and that's actually the biggest place for customer service, because not only do you have a good vantage point of the store when it is quiet, as opposed to, let's say, a cashier that can literally only see line of sight from end of register clothing to bags that they're bagging. They're so busy they can't pay attention to other potential LP issues in the area. But you're keeping it clean. People don't want to come into a dirty fitting room. I would have always above and beyond experiences in there, and people constantly commenting about how clean it was and how meticulous it was. And you had visits, which I'm sure you're familiar with too. And in your line of service, people would come in and I wouldn't even know. You would have these ecstatic assistant managers that come in and go, "You just had the DM come in and you gave them great customer service." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're like,
"Yeah,
what did you say to him?" I'm like, I don't know. Well, how do you not know? I'm like, because I don't know who the DM is. I just treated him like a customer. I thought that was kind of the whole point, right? Like, I'm not going to treat them any different. It was really shocking to see that surprised look on my assistant manager's face. So transferring that experience from where you were to where you are now. In your experience, what is the biggest oversight? Because I know you do coaching, you do different topics, finding the balance, leveraging LinkedIn. What's the biggest oversight that candidates or potential candidates has when it comes to just something as simple like a cover letter? What's your experience been on that?
I feel like people often are not putting themselves in the recruiter's or the hiring manager's seat. They often say, okay, here's what I did, or here's my strengths or my skills or what I've done, but they don't think about the language that the hiring manager is using. So they may have worked at Facebook, for example, and then they're looking to go get a job at LinkedIn. Facebook and LinkedIn talk about two positions very differently. You could be a marketing manager at Facebook and then want to go be a marketing manager at LinkedIn, but the way that they talk about those two positions is very different. So I think it's key that people really get into the shoes of whoever is reading their cover letter or their resume or their LinkedIn and say, okay, what language do they use? What are they really looking for? What is important? What is not important? And highlight that. Oftentimes people just say, well, here's what I do every day. Let me put a laundry list. Oftentimes they don't care what you do. They care about the value you add, the results you bring. So I encourage people to say, okay, what does a recruiter or hiring manager care about? Second step, I want you to communicate your value and what the CEO and the shareholders of the company would care about. That's the why that you need to communicate. Not why, okay, Bob over in Tennessee is going to care, but why would the CEO and shareholders care about the work that you as the marketing manager at Facebook do every day? And if you can communicate that why, the recruiter or hiring manager is going to love that.
When you have this cover letter, is this something that you would recommend be simpler? Or is this something that you should really do? For example, we're speaking about, would you go into real specific details, or is it just kind of a short and sweet, hey, listen, this is what I do. This is how I'd be an asset to the company. I just feel that, even me personally, when I've gone and spoke with recruiters and different workforce agencies, they all have different answers. So I'm just curious as to what your personal experience has been. What seems to be a major just oversight every single time a candidate comes in, they have like the exact same.
I think after the length of resumes, cover letters are probably one of the most controversial topics when it comes to recruiting and hiring people. So I often find that with cover letters, it really depends on the company and the position. Some companies, they love cover letters, they're going to read it. Other companies don't care. I just posted something on LinkedIn yesterday saying, do you submit a cover letter or not? Every answer was different. Some people said, oh yes, of course. If you don't submit one, you're arrogant. Other people are like, no, why would you waste your time? So it really depends. So I think as a candidate, you have to again put yourself in the shoes of that recruiter or hiring manager and say, okay, why am I submitting a cover letter? What value am I going to bring to them? And what are they going to get out of reading my cover letter? Personally, with my clients, unless the position asks for a cover letter, I tell them to instead spend that 30 minutes or an hour networking. Rarely is someone going to bring you in saying, oh my God, your cover letter was amazing, because a lot of people don't read it. Instead, they're going to bring you in because they're like, John, Jill, Samantha, and Carrie recommended that I bring you in. I've had that happen with clients because they're networking hardcore, and all these people reach out to the hiring manager and provide references, or they have a phone call with the hiring manager. So I found the number of people who get interviews because of great networking is way higher than cover letters. So that's where I would focus the energy.
I agree with that. It's almost impossible sometimes to reach directly the hiring recruiter or manager for that company to do that very networking that needs to be done. But you're right. When you do have somebody that can vouch for you, it just makes it a lot easier. I did see that topic. I think I intentionally stayed out of it because as you saw, there were so many. I remember an older gentleman there was like, I can't remember a job that I didn't have a cover letter for. And I'm like, this is not a good place to do that. So, but it's true, and that's why I asked, because it's such a varying narrative and vantage point on that topic that got to be working with dozens of people on a monthly basis. What seems to be working and what doesn't, not just about what the good is, but also what's not and maybe what to avoid. But there's never a bad time to network. You should always be networking regardless.
I 100% agree. I think networking, most jobs are achieved by way of networking. It's helpful and necessary to network when you need a job, but it's also important to network when you don't need a job.
Excellent points and excellent answers. Tune in for the next episode with Kyle as we wrap up our conversation and how his focus on coaching and cover letters really does make a difference. Bonus! As a bonus, anyone else who is listening to the podcast and is interested or in need of a great resume review, cover letter, or just coaching among many other services Kyle is available for, you can actually send Kyle a screenshot of the podcast and mention the phrase, "Bring on the coffee," and schedule a consultation, and you will receive 25% off your first coaching session with Kyle by mentioning this podcast episode and phrase. You can also find our full conversation on YouTube at youtube.com/MikeTech Studios. That's MIKTEK Studios. This podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, or your podcast app of choice. This has been Michael Midnight, and until next time, take it easy. Just beware of waterfalls, maybe. Maybe.